Hey, welcome back to the Soul Pod. This is Stacy. Today's topic is pretty meaty. If you're a woman who's ever wondered why men are the way they are, or if you're a man who's ever felt isolated or lonely, which I think we all have, this is going to be a really good topic for you. It's going to shed some light on a lot of stuff, and some of it may be very useful for you if you have ever felt isolated or lonely, or wondered why men are the way they are, why they act the way they act. Uh, by the time you're done with this, we're done with this episode. I believe you'll have a higher level of empathy for yourself if you're a man, and a higher level of empathy for men if you're a woman. There's this quote from Atticus Finch, a character in To Kill a Mockingbird, the book by Harper Lee. Atticus says, "You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb inside his skin and walk around in it." We're in a really interesting time right now where we're looking at gender studies in a way that's never been looked at gender studies. We've been noticing the difference between men and women and really diving into it probably for the last 40 years academically, like 60, since the 50s, 60s, 70s, 40 to 60 years. But right now, things are accelerating in a huge way for a number of different reasons. But several years back, it was 10 or 12 years back, I think it was, a writer, Nora Vincent, wrote a book called Self-Made Man. And the book was written after doing this 18-month experiment. It's a year and a half where she dressed as a man, presented as a man, and lived her life as a man, really ostensibly to really become a fly on the wall and understand men better. She did like voice training and did, fake whiskers and all this stuff, and went out into the world, met new people, made new friends, and presented as a man to better understand men. There was a lot of things I think that she expected to find, things like male privilege and different levels of respect that men get. And she did find some of those things. She found that there are some male privileges that women don't have, and that people listen to men in a different way than they listen to women. Not better necessarily, but different. Women possess this one area where they get attention and people's attention when they're talking in ways that men don't, and vice versa, and on different topics. So it's sort of a mixed bag she found there. That it's kind of good, but it's kind of bad because men are disrespected in some ways that women aren't. We won't dive too much into that because what she really found interesting was that men have really hard struggles that she didn't realize, and most of these are to do with relationship building with other men and a general sense of isolation and sadness and loneliness that she didn't anticipate and was actually very surprised by. Vincent said, "What I'd experienced as a man was not the soul deadening callousness I had imagined, but the exact opposite." She said she experienced a suffocating solitude, a suffocating solitude. She expected that men would be cold and unfeeling and all that, which she found to not be true. When men get together, they're not cold and unfeeling, they just relate in a different way. But what she did find was this suffocating solitude she talked about. A lot of this comes from men kind of having to become an island. This is societal conditioning. As it turns out, we don't think about this much as men, but from day one, we're wrapped in a blue blanket, we're told we're a boy, and then we're told how boys are supposed to act for our entire life. And we're conditioned to be a specific way. But a lot of things fall onto our plate, things that we don't think about and things that women don't think about. One of the things that caught Nora Vincent's attention was that she never really thought much about flirting from a man's perspective. A woman's role in flirting is purely optional. She can flirt if she wants to, but generally the approach is the responsibility or the duty or the purview, whatever word we want to stick on that, of men. Women can essentially be where they're at and wait for the man to approach, and then they can make up their mind, yes, no, indifferent. But men, because of this need to, and as Vincent found out, she had to approach men and, or rather, approach women and get shot down repeatedly. That it was a painful process and made her more callous in a way, and really kind of get to build a bit of a wall, getting ready to be rejected, getting ready to be rejected, getting ready to be rejected. And she also found that women weren't attracted to what she thought they'd be attracted to, which was, a softer side, showing a softer side. She found that more and more women wanted a harder side. They wanted a guy who was more masculine, more, brusque. And that's what clicked for them when she approached. Otherwise, she found herself getting rejected repeatedly. This made her sad for men because she'd never considered that what it's like to be a guy approaching women repeatedly and being shot down. So guys, she realized, had to like build a wall to be able to do this sort of mating ritual. It's sort of like in nature. We've all seen these nature videos where you've got the male bird who does this ornate thing and maybe does a little bird dance, and to try to attract the mate. And then the female bird gets to decide, we're going to mate or we're not going to mate. And the male version of that as a human is this approach. This is our dance. This is our mating ritual, for lack of a better term. Another interesting experiment that happened was Elizabeth Gilbert, the author of Eat, Pray, Love. She told a friend that she had done a 1 week experiment dressing as a man to kind of ostensibly be the fly on the wall also, just kind of see what it's like walking a mile in a man's shoes. And she hasn't written extensively about this. I couldn't find a lot about it, but her friend said that Gilbert dressed as a man for a week, presented as a man, did the whole voice thing, worked on it, had a male friend even come help her to get all that stuff right. And when she was dressed and she was presenting right and she was walking right, her male friend said, "You're almost there. What you need to do now is you need to back away from your eyes about 6 inches. Back away from your eyes about 6 inches." And that surprised her and it shocked her, but she did it each time she went out of the house. She made a point of not being so forward. So she realized men aren't forward physically the way that women are, as effusive and outgoing. But she didn't realize emotionally too, like you have to back your eyes away. You don't lead so much. You don't do so much eye contact. And she said it made her soul sad each time she would go out because of this backing away. She also reported that it was the loneliest, saddest week she had ever spent. Again, kind of echoing Nora Vincent's report, right? That being a man is a sad, lonely thing if you've never experienced it. A woman trying to walk in a man's shoes reveals this to us, which is an interesting thing because as men, we don't really notice it, do we? It's this research in these two examples they're really useful because it helps us understand something that we don't understand, both as men and as women. There's a ton of videos out there right now. We're in a point in our life in the history of the world where we're going through a sociological experiment we have never had the opportunity to go through before, and that's to a great extent, because of the trans movement. A lot of men and women are changing genders, so there are a ton. If you go out and you look up videos using the quote "what it's like to be a man," you'll get a ton of hits from women who were once, or men who were once women, talking about the parts of it that they don't like, and predominantly it's these same things: this disconnection, this loneliness, this feeling of being isolated and not being able to connect the way they once had as women. Let me share another quote from Vincent. She said the toll of this constant vigilance, this relentless performance, is crushing. And she said it's no wonder men have a higher rate of suicide and substance abuse. It got me wondering when I read that quote. So globally, men are 3 times more likely to commit suicide than women. And in the United States, 80% of suicides are men. 80%. So that's pretty huge. Men are also less likely to use mental health services, according to a recent survey. And this is attributed to social stigma and vulnerability, that, men are not yet to that point where the majority of us feel comfortable being that vulnerable. I myself do, but I've done a ton of work to get there. The American Enterprise Institute also reported that men report feeling lonely and socially isolated at a higher rate than women do. Again, not surprising given what we've been talking about. So why does this all matter, really? I guess what you'll wonder. why it matters is if you're a woman and you've ever wondered, why your guy's so distant, it's because we've been conditioned to be distant. Uh, I spend a ton of time very with great men who've done a ton of work on themselves and are incredibly outgoing. Most of my friends are big huggers, and we have no problem talking about what's in here and sharing what's in our heart, sharing emotion. I have no problem crying in front of my friends, you know, not all the time, thank goodness, but only when it's called for. But I have no problem letting another man hold space for me in that way. But not everybody is. And I'd say the vast majority, based on these statistics, are not that way. We're not given permission to be that way. So if you find that a guy is distant, it's probably not by choice. Almost certainly not. It's because he's still figuring it out. He's spent his entire life being conditioned to be distant. And now he has to do the work to give himself permission to not be. So with a little empathy, you'll probably have better luck getting through that. Ladies, if you know men who are distant, who are your friends, your brothers, your cousins, your fathers, uncles, whatever, there's something about getting permission from women that seems to be easier for us to start practicing that. You know, hey, if you need a shoulder to cry on, I'm here for you. And really, men, what we need to do is we need to learn how to be that open with our male friends too. Most of us, because of vulnerability fears, because of judgment fears, don't, or we struggle with it at the very least. So men, that's the takeaway for you, that you may not even know that you've been struggling with this. I never thought about it. I never really considered it that deeply, at least. I was aware of it. I've done a ton of work around being more vulnerable because I know that's a great place to work, but I'd never really thought about the social conditioning and really the extent of it, or looked at it through the eyes of these women, for instance. This information they bring forward on this is really illuminating to me. That, yeah, I knew it was a problem. I didn't know it was that big of a thing. And it's pretty amazing. Vincent said, men are in fact imprisoned by their roles just as women are. Imprisoned by our roles. We know that women are imprisoned by their roles in America. We talk about that an awful lot, and rightly so, we should. We need to look at these things to make sure that everyone that wants to break out of the roles they're in has the opportunity to break out of the roles they're in, to be the most fully developed human they can be. And that includes men. And that's part of the conversation that's being left out that I want to bring forward and say, you know what? We need to also break out of the roles we've been conditioned for. I would argue that a fully developed man, what I call a masculine man, and what the definition of a masculine man is, isn't just a man who's strong and knows himself and is confident and has all the characteristics I've talked about in earlier videos. It's also a man who is sensitive, who is aware of his feelings, that he doesn't live in them constantly, but he's aware of them, can manage them, can speak them out loud. That's a fully developed masculine man. That's the dead center of, if you picture a scale, that's the fully developed masculine man. Now, over on one side, you've got the weepy guy who doesn't control his, he's very in touch with his emotions, but he doesn't manage them very well. Then over on the other end, you've got this guy who is fake masculine, who hides his insecurities through acting brusquely and overtly and like a dick, basically. The closer you get to the center with integrating the true you is when you become fully masculine. Guys, I want to give you permission to feel empathy for yourself, to understand this, because when you understand that you are carrying this thing, especially when you look at it through the lens of the fact that I know we've all had lonely moments, I know we've all had isolated moments. Us guys, we may not cry by ourselves in the dark, or maybe we do, but we definitely cry inside sometimes, because it's not easy to be a man. It's not. I'm not saying it's easy to be a woman either, ladies. I'm not saying that at all. I understand your journey too, not to the extent that you do. But I think it's time for us to give men permission to understand themselves even more deeply. I love you guys. I'm one of you guys. Respect the journey and keep doing the work to become the best you that you can be. Thank you guys all for being here. If you haven't checked out the Soul Podcast yet, check it out on Spotify and 23 other platforms, really anywhere you watch or rather listen to podcasts. It's longer form versions of these same sorts of topics. I'll be covering this topic, in fact, in a much longer form, maybe up to 20 minutes long with more detail. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it, and I'll see you on the next video.